All right. Good afternoon. Good morning. Welcome to Face 2020. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the Sankofa. Sorry, I should put myself on spotlight. No. Yeah. Sorry. No. Just give me a second. I seem to have. I'm really terrible with technology most of the time. So yeah, sorry. I was saying that we're going to be talking about our Sankofa Cape Town to Cairo road trip. For those of you who joined us early, you may have noticed that we were talking about how this is, the logistics of it with COVID, but we'll talk more about that later. So we're joined today, really pleased to be joined by Lerato Mogoatlhe, a journalist from South Africa. We'll talk. I'll talk a little bit more about what she's done later, but just a few housekeeping notes. So if you have any questions for Lerato, could you please go to the Slido page? So that is bit.ly, so bit.ly/face 2020. So face is uppercase. Q and A are also uppercase, while the and is lowercase, to ask any questions you have. All your microphones are on mute. If you want to contact FACE, Forever Africa Conference and Events, our email address is foreverafrica, one word, @outlook.com. During today's session or after, our hashtag to be used on Twitter and on social media is hashtag Face 2020. You are not obliged or mandated to tweet about Face 2020, but we really appreciate it when you do. So the first thing we're going to try and attempt to do is share a short video about the Sankofa trip that Face has been planning for a while. So I'm going to share the video, and I hope it works, and then we'll have a conversation with Lerato.
We took a slow road to the coast, trying to find a reason for the things that matter most. And as the dawn became a blue Savannah sky, I thought I saw an endless sunrise. If we knew what we had lost, could we bear to feel the pain or count the cost? From how we live, how we die, songs we sing, flags we fly, the things we choose to leave behind, chains of time. Oh, a battle lost, a battle won, another one just begun. And when all is said and done, we turn our faces to the sun.
So that's the sort of short video that we have, and just a few sort of words to recap why we want to do this. It seems, I think, without sort of thinking about it deeply, it seems like we're just going to sort of wander across, from Cape Town to Cairo. But if you've been listening to our webinars, so from first one to the one we did yesterday, we've really been focusing about decolonization and what that actually means in the context of centering I don't know why I have any. What that really means in the context of centering Pan-African knowledges. So decolonization not as an add-on, but actually giving value to knowledge created, curated, produced by Africans. So we understand, or we are sort of proceeding on the understanding that there's no decolonization without centering Pan-African knowledges, but also the understanding that we are in a position of privilege in what we call the global north. And there are already structures in place which almost operate automatically to keep out or exclude Pan-African sort of knowledges. So how do we reimagine that, re-envision that from a distance? And we completely believe that it is impossible to reimagine that sort of structure, that pre-existing structure from where we are. It's kind of like you've placed yourself on a mountain and then you think, well, we know what's going to happen in the valley, when the mountain itself is in some ways is not legitimately constructed. So that's kind of the overarching ideas of behind the Sankofa trip. So we thought that it's best to exchange these ideas with a person I would consider an expert on traveling the African continent. And actually Lerato is a world traveler. Now, in 2008, and I will ask Lerato to talk more about this. Lerato was supposed to travel, I think, about a 3-month trip across West Africa, and it turned into a 5-year trip. And she's written about this in her book, Vagabond, Wandering Through Africa on Faith. And the book has been described as a love story to Africa. The journey she's made, across Africa within those 5 years. She traveled on her own, traveled mostly by road and very low budget. So it's kind of, again, speaking very much to what we believe here in faith. So, yeah, sorry. I am struggling a little bit with my my technology today. So to ask my first question to Lerato. Actually, my first question is not the question I said I was going to ask. It's a slightly different question. I want to know exactly how many countries in Africa you have visited, traveled / lived in, if you know the exact number.
I lived in Mali and Ethiopia for 6 months each, in Nairobi and Bujumbura for 2.5 months to 3 months, and then other places, maybe a week here, 2 days here, 2 weeks there, several days here and there. I think I've been to 28 or 29 places, but in the book, I only write about 21. Okay.
Yeah, because I've seen lots of numbers. So I know in the book is 21, but 28 that's a lot. I don't know of anyone else who's traveled that many countries. So I think my second question then is, so what do you think about this thing that we're planning? Is it completely mad?
No, in fact, I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I meeting you on this journey? I think it's very, very exciting, particularly because there's an even more critical and urgent need right now to redefine what it means to understand knowledge, but also what it means to understand Africa, to understand traveling Africa, to understand and experience communities and life around the continent. Because for me, traveling the continent is not the objective. Traveling is just an act of packing your bags and going somewhere else. But the journey, when you arrive and you go from place to place, you sit with people, you experience local life, you meet new people, you open up yourself to whatever opportunities lie to you on the road, and there's going to be so many of them because people on this continent, we're very loving, we're very hospitable, and we cannot let a visitor pass by without offering tea, without offering lunch, in some cases offering you a place to sleep. So you are going to discover what it truly, truly means when, despite all the beauty that Africa has, and it's incredible, despite the rich heritage, despite all the cultures, despite everything that makes Africa a top destination, you will be pleasantly surprised to discover that, in fact, it is the people who make it a home. And it's going to be very, very wonderful for you, particularly because you are African.
Thank you. Do you have any advice for us? So what are the things we should think about? So the plan at the moment is to go with a mixed group of people, so not just academics, young and old.
Yeah.
And also not just Africans, but majorly Africans and African descended people.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to us?
It's to be humble and to let, actually it's humility. Humility is the game changer. Allow yourself to be taught by the people you meet. Allow yourself to listen to the people you meet. They're the ones who live where you will be. They're the ones who know the ebbs and flows of life there. And often I find that when you're traveling, you're in a rush, you're excited to discover a place, you want to gobble everything up so that you can finally say the things I read about and the things I imagined I've now experienced. But in part of doing that, a lot of people are going to ask for your time. A lot of people who want to know more than your name. They want to know who you are, where you come from. What do you think about a specific issue? Why are you on this journey? Where are you going next? Do you know where to buy petrol? Have you eaten? So those things, they might sometimes feel like a lot, because absolutely everywhere you go, that is what will follow you. But that is hospitality, and it's always so wonderful to fully embrace it, because it changes the tone of how you travel, how you experience your travels. I'll use an example of when I started traveling. When I went to Senegal, it was probably my 5th time out of South Africa. I hadn't traveled for more than 13 or 14 days, and all trips were media trips. And when I got there, I carried so much of myself, even though I was finally excited to live my dream. In West Africa, in Ethiopia and a few other parts of the continent, actually, people eat from communal plates. And I was invited as a guest to someone's house, and they were very happy at lunchtime to invite me to eat. And it was day 2 in West Africa. And I had never encountered that. And I was honestly having an internal meltdown over it. And I couldn't eat, and I, in the beginning, was very conscious of the differences in my new life and my old life, and missing some of the comforts of my old life. But the moment I surrendered myself completely and said to myself, you know what, it is what it is. This is not only West Africa. Every country has its own unique identity and character, and take it for what it is. And allow, most importantly, I will not say this enough, allow yourself to learn and discover. You are not just there to learn from as an academic. You're not just there to learn because of an intellectual and to seek that type of knowledge. You're also there to learn how to love. For instance, when I was traveling through Sudan, I noticed something that was peculiar at first. Everywhere I went, from the capital city Khartoum, through traveling to the north, I traveled around the north by land. There's always two types of jugs of water. One is a plastic kettle, and another one is a clay jar. The plastic kettles are put everywhere, even in towns, even in CBDs, so that at prayer time, if you want to wash your body so that you are able to pray right there and there, you can do that. You don't have to ask for this water. The second one is the water in the clay pot. It's drinking water. People even have it outside of their yards. They have it outside of their houses. If you're walking down the street and there's no one at home, but you're thirsty, you can just walk into the yard and help yourself to a cooling drink of water. In some places like graveyards, they have these jars by 20, 30 of them. And I asked my friend that I made, and I said to her, this is very peculiar. I've never noticed something like this before in all my years of traveling. At the time, I had been traveling around the continent for 10 years. And she said, well, Sudan is a desert country. Why should anyone be thirsty? And why, if you're thirsty, should you have to buy water to quench your thirst? And it was such a simple and a tender and a very unique experience of love, you know. So being open to those experiences, open your eyes. I always say when you travel, look up, look down, look left, look right, turn around, listen again, read people's body language, just be involved and allow yourself to experience not only what you came there to do and what you expect to do, but also the unexpected, the surprises and miracles that are ultimately going to make this a journey of a lifetime.
Thank you. I think I completely, it resonates with me. I haven't traveled much of Africa. My sort of experience is mostly West Africa and a few days in Ethiopia. But I think one thing that really strikes me is the way in which you have to sort of almost be quite flexible with your plans if you really want to enjoy yourself. Like you have to sort of immerse yourself. Yeah. And what you say makes so much sense with my own, though meager experiences of traveling the continent. So, but what would you say then are the best places? So I know people listening may be coming on our Sankofa trip, but also maybe thinking of, you know, where to visit across the continent. Where are the best places to visit, and why would you say they're the best places?
I'll start on the Sankofa trip. Egypt. I am so excited about Egypt because Egypt is truly, truly ancient, and the old Egyptian history lives side by side with Cairo, the cosmopolitan city, the metropolis, you know. So that makes it so exciting that on my left, literally when you're in Giza, when you look at some point, I was looking on my right, there were the pyramids, and on my left, there was an internet cafe and a shop selling iPhones and Samsung phones, you know. I really, really loved that about Egypt. I loved the food, the culture, I loved the ancient heritage, and that it's quite so visibly still part of the city. And this is not just the pyramids, there's also old Cairo and there's the Islamic Cairo. So Cairo is Egypt, but definitely Cairo is the one I'm most excited for. And I think Ethiopia needs some patience, definitely. It needs patience, but I loved that Ethiopia is a destination. It teaches you that actually you do not travel on your terms. You show up and everything else takes over. Because in Ethiopia, everything, if in Ethiopia, you eat Ethiopian food. If you want anything that's not Ethiopian, you have to specify and you have to go look for it. You know, I'm used to having to look particularly hard to eat traditional African food in South Africa. Elsewhere, I'm used to sometimes having to look a little bit harder, or sometimes having all options around me. In Ethiopia, though, in particular, I remember how Ethiopian identity it holds such a place of prominence that it was Ethiopian culture on TV, Ethiopian food around me, it was Ethiopian music around me, it was Ethiopian drinks, it was Ethiopian coffee. The culture is very, very tenderly and lovingly held on to. So in a way, you feel as though you could have been, you know, give or take 100 years. You know, you feel that generally when it comes to how people cherish and hold on to their culture, it really feels that it hasn't changed. And in a way, it hasn't, because Ethiopia is a Orthodox Christian country. So a lot of the food culture, for instance, is dictated by that. Oftentimes, several times a year, the religion calls for periods of fasting. And in these periods, people only eat vegan food. That is what restaurants around me were serving. I could not find meat, I could not find fish. And when I said, but you're a restaurant, surely I can have a piece of meat. They said, well, but we are fasting, you know? So I really it can feel a bit like a struggle. At first, it felt, in some instances, it felt like, where's my choice to be an individual? But I appreciated that actually you can stop, you can completely slow down and change your expectations so that you experience something more beautiful, so that you take part in a collective communal experience, even if that is not what you identify as. You get to experience the beauty and intimacy of that. You're going to Tanzania, aren't you?
Yes.
Ah, so beautiful, so beautiful. Enjoy the nature reserves. Enjoy the beauty of just the nature reserves and the game reserves, and the people as well. And the food. You're going to Rwanda. Rwanda is beautiful. The nice thing now is that the tourism industry has been developed significantly, and if you are up for it, you can trek the mountain gorillas. But also, for me, Rwanda was a bit of a painful place because I ended up going to several mass graves, and I had a breakdown subsequently. I had to get into therapy, try to sort out my headspace because I was dealing with my PTSD in a totally destructive way. And then I had to address how I normally deal with pain and sadness in my life, right? And I think this was such an unexpected experience. One of my favorite quotes about traveling comes from a book written by a friend of mine, and it says, "Journeys create journeys, internal and external." And he wrote this in his memoirs about traveling Africa. And Rwanda was such a perfect manifestation of their internal journey that I went on unintentionally, but that subsequently paid off in my life. And that's what traveling this continent will do, if you allow yourself to be open and to be vulnerable with some things. Because for me, I think it's a waste to go on an epic trip around the continent and to just come out with been there, done that, ticked off the bucket list, you know. It's going to be such a waste. So the emotions, your spirit, your intellect, your knowledge has to come along, questioning yourself. How am I learning? How am I expressing my Pan-Africanism? Just there's so much that's beautiful that you're going to explore. And Botswana is great. Yeah, every country is going to give you something, but Tanzania, the epic beauty. And if you can go to Zanzibar, sweeter. Egypt, the heritage. Ethiopia, the pride, centering your identity completely without compromise. And this is not on your journey, but for me, Mali is a necessary experience. Mali is the country where I was able to finally settle into my life as a vagabond, as a traveler. That's where I was able to be so comfortable eating with 10 other hands in a plate that it felt weird to eat alone, you know. In Mali, I learned to live with people. I lived with a house that had 10, at least at minimum 10 people in the house at the same time. And I'm not used to that. I come from a family of 2, and at home we're very space oriented. In my house now it's just me and my partner as well. So there's like lots of space, there's lots of silence. And I was having to live in an environment that was stimulating me all the time. But even as I was living through that, people were loving me so gently that when I lived in Timbuktu, they taught me French. Friends would come over to greet me for some tea, take me out, and every single act that we did involved me increasing my French vocabulary. When I went to buy roast goat meat by the corner, that guy would sit me down, he would brew tea for me, and we would have a conversation in French, no matter how broken my French was, so that by the time I left Timbuktu, my French was comfortable enough for me to use it without having to lean on a translation. By the time I left Mali, my French was good enough for the taxi drivers and the touts, everyone who works at the art markets, to complain that now that I could finally speak French, they discovered that I could drive a hard bargain and would not budge, you know. So Mali does that. In Mali, when you're walking down the street and people are eating, they run after you. and ask you to come eat, and you can't say no. You know, they don't care that you just ate now at a restaurant. I'm inviting you to come eat. It's so intimate. It's but I wrote about it in Vagabond. I say to be Malians love differently, with tenderness and the utmost care for your heart, you know. So it makes living in Mali, traveling Mali, just even experiencing Mali, it makes it a gift for the soul, because you are definitely you're going to shed yourself. Mali doesn't have, especially Bamako, doesn't have a lot to offer in terms of the razzle dazzle, you know. There are no bucket list things. You're going to appreciate the history. You're going to appreciate the music culture. This is the home of Habib Kwate, Salif Keita, Umusangare, Amadou and Miriam, and they routinely still perform in Bamako. So you are going to take absolute pleasure in the little things in life. But after you have taken that pleasure in them, you're actually going to discover that it's an experience that never ever leaves you, because it's rare to find a place that is so humble. You know, it has nothing. There really is nothing. It is so humble. In fact, I remember the first time I got there, I was so shocked by how old and broken, in need of fixing the city looked. But ultimately, the tenderness, the love, the gentleness, the patience, the music culture, the heritage, the depth of Malian history, and to be able to go to some places like Timbuktu, Dogon Country, Jene, and so on, it is a rare privilege. And I think also Ghana is great if you've never traveled to West Africa and you need a place to start. Ghana is great because it's an English-speaking country. You won't be stuck with language if you don't understand French. And also it's fun, it's hip, it's pulsating, it's ancient, it's everything I love about West Africa in terms of how West Africa traditions still run as deeply as the ocean, how cities are vibrant, how there's a distinct transition between the day life and the nightlife, and how that is a completely different experience, and how big and bold the personalities are. I mean, I love it. Like, oh, West Africa is my favorite place in the world. But the nice thing about Ghana is that it's not as big as with Accra. It's not as big as Lagos and not as big. Therefore, you can just experience it without constantly having to also adjust to being in a city that has a very, very distinct and bold personality.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when you said Accra is not as big as Lagos, yeah, Lagos is massive. I don't think you should start. This is my suggestion to anyone who asks me they want to go to Africa. I say, don't start with Lagos.
No.
Don't start with Lagos. I mean, start with somewhere. And yeah, I think Ghana is a really good entry point, especially if you are English speaking. Ghana is don't start with Lagos though. No. Yeah. I kind of feel now like we can make a detour from, on our road trip and quickly go into Mali, because the way in which you talked about Mali, now I just want us to go. It's a long way off the path, but yeah.
It's a long way.
Yeah, but I think Timbuktu is also one place that I think almost everyone in the world should visit. Timbuktu. That would be my suggestion.
I completely agree with you, and I think these are the places that Timbuktu is one of those places that you visit. You visit to question. I think the most important thing is to question why it is so easy for us to accept history and knowledge at face value. We do know that we need to interrogate it. We do know that it doesn't even reflect a real or a lived experience, particularly in Africa, definitely. And we do know that it's not just an existence that's shaped by colonialism and what happened afterwards. Yet we do not interrogate it, enough. For us we do not question and interrogate it enough for this knowledge to come as easily as breathing, right? So Timbuktu, when you get there, you get, again, very, very old place that has nothing to offer. It's just a city in the desert. Everything looks like the color of the desert, even the sky, even the horizon. The food crunches with sand because there's absolutely sand everywhere. You can't even avoid it. But it also has has manuscripts that have been around since maybe the 12th, 13th century, and that were passed down from generation to generation, and therefore still passed down to generations in a family today. So when you walk into a family's private library and there's a manuscript, though, if you're visiting someone and they show you a manuscript, they're not showing you what you see today. They're showing you their family history. They're showing you their heritage of their city. They're showing you Africa as a literary continent. They're showing you Africa as a writing continent. They are showing you, they're asking you to imagine Africa back at a time when Timbuktu or Mali was rich and dripping with gold, to imagine a time of the Swanghai Empire, Mali empires, Asante empires. There's so much that a single thing can trigger, a single experience can trigger, that in a moment you travel back, you transgress time, you transgress geography. And in Timbuktu, in particular, it stands out for me. I've been to other places that have manuscripts, but in Timbuktu, they are not just kept at a library. Families still have them, you know. Some still have volumes and volumes of them. They still give them over to the next generation, and their generation still holds on to them as dearly, so that it will be given to the one after and the one after and the one after. And that is so powerful to me about Timbuktu.
I mean, one of the things that, you know, that's just making me think about is, you know, how there's a connectivity between the past and the present that we, you know, in sort of almost formalized knowledge systems tends to lose that connectivity, how the past is still present. Well, the past is present in the present. We kind of lose that because we're going, this is a fact now, and that's it. We don't need to know, you know, what was and how that what was is still is. And I think that, you know, what you've said about, you know, Timbuktu is just beautiful in encapsulating that. So I was going to ask about, because we talked about this before we started, you know, what your plans are for traveling in the future, especially with COVID, because you were talking about curating some group travel.
My plans, I was going to start curating trips this year in October, starting in Lagos. So I've cancelled all trips now. I'm probably going to start curating again towards the end of next year, or in 2022 as well. I think the biggest change that really COVID has done for me is, if I was going to travel solo, I can just pack my bags and go. But now that I'm curating for groups, even the infrastructure that I had in these specific countries, I have to go back and re-examine them. I have to go back and now not just find out, do you have hot water for my guests? Do you have aircon when it's the height of the hot season? But also find out what health and safety measures are in place and how do you implement them, so that when people travel, ultimately we come back with good memories, great time, and epic stories, nothing else.
Yeah. So I think I was also going to ask you, because you've already alluded to a lot of this, you know, how the things you've learned by traveling Africa, but is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson was an affirmation. It's the affirmation of freedom, to give myself a shot. You know, I woke up one day and I said to myself, well, that's it. I've always wanted to travel this continent for various reasons, in different periods of my life. And I said, well, that's it. I'm resigning from my job and I'm leaving. It was so casual. You know, people thought, that is so casual. What do you mean you woke up, grabbed coffee, and opened your laptop, and instead of writing your column for the day, you wrote out your resignation letter? And I think that it just really emboldened me to just also have an open mind towards life, try again, give myself a shot, but also always remember that dreams are not that hard to manifest. Sometimes they can be challenging, but also there are many partners along the way, and they will help us make the dream come true. Like you said, when I started traveling, I was broke, you know, I had never traveled, so I underestimated how expensive it would be. And then I had never freelanced as well, so I underestimated just how late those freelance checks are, you know. So I kept on running out of money, and I decided that instead of just stressing about it and worrying, I'm going to start telling people my financial situation. So when I wanted to travel from Takrady in Ghana to Abidjan in Ivory Coast, I didn't have enough money to pay for the whole way through. I explained to the bus driver, I left my passport there. In 2 days' time, I went back to pay the difference and pick up my passport. When in Abidjan, when I got there, I got into a taxi and I asked this guy, Mohammed, I asked him what his name was, and he said Mohammed. We had never met, of course. So I asked him to take me to Village Kiyi, and he didn't understand that I didn't have payment for him. And when we go to Village Kiyi, they also didn't know me. It's a collective of artists. They didn't know me, but it was the only place I knew in the city without money. So I went there to ask for a place to sleep. And the only thing they said, oh, it's such a pity you came today. 2 days ago, we had a party, you know. And when I called Mohammed a few days later after my paycheck came to pay him as agreed, he said to me, no, sister, actually, don't worry, you know. And this kept on being the story of my life definitely throughout a lot of the 5 years. There has been people along the way helping me in any way, in any form that they could, to make sure that I get to live another day in their city or get to leave and start life elsewhere. And I think ultimately that's just what happens. Sometimes you might have a dream, it might look like it's too big, or that you need to have all the experience in the world for it, or all the resource for it. That may be the case, but also ultimately there's also the option of just going with it. And you know what? It does work out.
Yeah. I think my next question, probably my last question, is, so what's the best place to buy your book?
The best place to buy my book is Amazon, but Amazon is now sold out. So there's a digital platform called Afroculture, culture with a K.
Okay.
AFROKULCA. I'll send this to you so that you can put it on your Twitter as well.
Okay.
They're based in South Africa, but they do ship internationally.
Okay. Yeah. So if you haven't got the book Vagabond, Wandering Africa Through Fates by Lerato Mogoatlhe, please get the book. It's like I said at the start of the program, it's a love story to Africa, and I love love stories, and I think a love story to Africa is probably one of the best love stories we can find. So if there are any questions from the audience, can you please put them on the Slido? It always takes about a few seconds for us to get questions. I think yesterday I thought there were no questions, and then suddenly we had about 10 questions, just as I was saying there are no questions. So let's give people a few seconds to write their questions. Yeah, I'm trying to sort out. Yeah, I should actually read the instructions to Zoom before I start using Zoom. When I want to know something about how Zoom works, then I quickly Google the question. I've never read the instructions. So any questions?
There's one here, I see.
If someone wants to ask a question.
Teniola has raised a hand.
Okay, I'm looking, where is she? Yeah, sorry. Let me go to gallery view. Because it always sort of looks different depending on who's. I can't find. Oh, okay, yeah. I think you can unmute now. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I can hear you.
Yes.
Can you?
Okay, yes. I can't find actually where to ask questions for some reason on this, like where you can type questions. It's not showing up on my screen. Maybe people are having the same challenge. But thank you so much, Lerato. Like when I saw your story on Twitter, it was very inspiring. I tried to do something similar, I think a year ago, but just from Nigeria to Senegal. But then
Wow.
what you said about, like even not having money and just trusting yourself and trusting your gut, how did you find the strength and the courage to do that? Because that was something that blocked me from traveling for so long. I know that I schooled in Ghana, even though I lived in Nigeria. So I
Hmm.
used to go from Ghana to Nigeria by road very often. And many times I would want to just stop off at Benin Republic or Togo, but I never did throughout my 4 years in university because I was just so scared, being a woman. People would tell me that
Yeah.
there's a lot of voodoo in Benin Republic, that they'll use me for rituals and the bad things will happen to me. And I was just always so scared. Then I realized that I'm not going to stop being a woman anytime soon. So I have to do whatever I have to do, and and like whatever will happen. I just have to get used to it. But then where did you find the courage to just not even have the security of finances or knowing people and just doing, things without fear?
At first, I thought I could travel differently. So my plan wasn't to take time off for a long term and travel. I thought I could travel bit by bit, maybe go on vacation here and there, or even try to move to a different country. But then I realized that all of those things, at first, I realized that I couldn't afford to travel. That's what I thought at the time. So that just made it impossible because I had just started working. And then what I then subsequently realized was that the reason I thought I couldn't afford to travel is because a lot of the travel that's created is actually, and I'm guilty of that because I, as a journalist, I've done that, where content is sponsored, right, to a point where just me, a regular intern earning like $600, goes to spend 2 nights at a top penthouse that costs 5 times my salary in one night. And I must come back and write this to my audience of people who are on the same economic scale as me, more or less, or not that far off from me. And when that is what you consume from lifestyle content, then it creates the impression that there's a barrier to traveling, that you can't afford it. What you don't see is when you go with your own pocket and you make it suit your budget. That was the biggest difference for me. Once I realized that actually I can travel on a budget and I will make it work on a budget. The second thing again was also what helped me is that I'm very aggressive about gender stereotyping, like aggressive, right? So for as long as I have been me, even when I was a kid, if I was told to sit properly, I would swear up a storm like a troop. If ever there was, whenever someone tried to sort of gender my life, I would swear up and down. And that was the only time my mom would look at my swearing and not think, where did I get this one from? So that was allowed. So because of that, I never had any fear of being a woman alone, because I see it as I'm an adult, I've been living in this continent all my life, I've been living in this planet all my life. The only thing that's going to change is that I'm going to be in a different city. I'm aware that I'm going to be by myself. So what I do is, what I would do is that to always keep myself in spaces that were very safe, in the sense that I'm in a new place, but the part where I'm going at a particular, let's say where I'm going at night, I can get myself out of in a flash if that's necessary. Another thing that I did was that I would keep, initially to help me ease into traveling, I would keep to places where a lot of tourists went, so I stayed in places that where I knew if I went to sleep here, I would find lots of other travelers sleeping there. I went to restaurants that I knew were listed on Lonely Planet and all those travel guides, only to give me the comfort of being other people who were like me, in the sense that, like me, they don't know this place, they're discovering it, and that gave me some sort of comfort. And then the third thing was to take a breather. And this happened to me in Ghana. I was working with, I think, maybe 3 or 4 guys. We met at a restaurant, and it was getting very late, and I was in town. I was basically going to sleep out at the club because I was waiting for my bus, and I was too cheap to pay for a hotel. So they said, let's just go to my house and hang out. We'll eat, we'll have fun. As we are walking there, I suddenly think, damn, I'm a woman. I don't know these guys. It's dark, it's at night. Where am I going? And I just said to them, guys, we have to take me back because I'm no longer feeling safe right now. So I found that a combination of being vocal, a combination of keeping yourself to surroundings that you're comfortable with helps. You don't have to take yourself out of your comfort zones in an extreme way when you travel. You absolutely don't have to.
I mean, I think that makes sense. We have to keep safe where we live anyway. So same approach we take to keeping safe where, in life follows us when we travel, I guess is what you're saying.
Yes.
So I've got a couple of questions on the Slido link. Will you be writing a part 2 of your book? So are you planning to do more travel that you will write about?
If I'm very lucky, yes. I want to travel to places that are recovering from conflict and write about them from a perspective of home. So places that are recovering from conflict, some refugee camps and refugee communities.
Okay, and the second question I have, you may choose not to answer this. Where do you stand on the jollof rice wars?
There is nothing like the jollof rice wars, because I know that the best rice dish in the world is the national dish of Senegal, chep jene.
Yeah, I mean, I have got into a lot of trouble with the jollof rice wars, and I'm not going to say anything because this is being recorded and can be shown to family back home. So I'm not going to say anything about the jollof rice wars. But I think I think jollof rice is a fantastic dish. Whoever has made it,
absolutely.
What
an invention!
Yeah. I mean, it's always fascinating when we have these conversations about jollof rice and whose rice is the best. It's all delicious. That's why we like it. That's why we talk about it. Yeah. I think we have actually run out of questions. So just oh no, we haven't run out of questions. I need to. Who else has? Yeah. Okay. Yes, I have unmuted you, Val.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to meet you, Foluke, finally, and you, Lerato. Thank you, Lerato. Thank you so much. That was actually just so, I can't think of a word other than nourishing. So yes, thank you very much. I wonder if I can indulge myself and ask you a question about this term, true decolonization, which was actually in the brief for today's session. And this is a question about listening and speaking. So I love the way in which, Lerato, you had this lovely phrase in the beginning where you said what we need to do is to be humble, to have humility, and to allow ourselves to listen. And I think that's just so important at the moment, when obviously with everything that is going on, and the listening is what is important. But my question is, who can speak then? Who can speak to disrupt knowledges, as we've been talking about, to do what you are calling true decolonization? And is this about having had the experience? So, if you have done some traveling, if you can say, oh yes, I'm British Asian, I'm not black, but I lived in Kenya for this many years, and you know, this is my grandmother's gidenga that I'm wearing, and, you know, that allows me to speak, you know, or should I just be listening, you know? And this is a challenge that, you know, I'm asking as a British Indian, as a brown woman who is being asked questions at the moment about, you know, how do we decolonize the curriculum, you know, and I just say, well, go and read Foluke's blog on the problems with decolonizing and why you say decolonization is impossible, which I loved, by the way. So I feel like I've been talking for a while and you've probably forgotten my question, which was, who can speak to disrupt the knowledges? Thank you.
Lerato, do you want to respond to that?
Yes. I think the people whose experience it is can speak for themselves. I think what has been happening and therefore what has been missing is that often we all have something to say, and that's perfectly fine, but we also want to speak to experiences that do not belong to us, you know. So for instance, in the context of decolonizing knowledge, I'm just thinking, if you go to a place like Dogon country in Mali, and you say you are there to decolonize, what do you mean? Because their knowledge system has never been colonized, you know, their cultures have never been colonized in a lot of spaces in the continent, in terms of how people express themselves culturally, what people learn. So then when you engage with that reality, I guess for me, the best possible thing to do is to let the person who has lived the experience be the ones who speak. So no longer just saying, oh, we're making a room at the table, but is it sit, so lunch has an album, sit at the table. It's not about saying, oh, we're making a sit at the table so that we understand, let's say, indigenous knowledge system. It's no longer about that. It's about saying, these are the knowledge systems that already exist. I'm gonna sit down and let the people whose culture and whose knowledge this is school me. Then I can take that and interpret that any which way positively in a manner that then leads us towards the greater agenda of decolonizing. And I guess that would ultimately be that the knowledge that we currently know as what we currently know as knowledge, we know that is skewed, and we know that is being informed by many factors, some of them violent, some of them forcefully forcefully making people shed their cultures and shed their knowledge systems for survival. So we need to start by having people who lived those experiences be the ones who are talking.
Sorry, forgotten that I'd muted myself. So I completely agree with Lerato on that. I think, especially when we're talking about experiences, there's sometimes we're thinking we're speaking generally when we're speaking personally. And once you've spoken personally, I think it's okay to then listen to what somebody else is saying about their own personal experience. And I think that's kind of where we sometimes get confused. And also in not recognizing the different power people have of being heard. So it's not, you know, if we're all speaking, but somebody's not being heard. And this is why I often think of it as punishing my students by making them read Can the Subaltern Speak by Spivak, because it's not just about speaking, as Spivak says. It's about the fact that some people have been speaking, we don't even have the epistemic tools to understand what they're saying. So there's something we need to change about ourselves to listen to what they're saying. That would be my own response in addition to what you said. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. Is there anything you wish you had known before you started your journeys?
Yes, I wish I had known that traveling is completely accessible, and to not believe anyone, not even the bloggers who make listicles about 7 mistakes every first-time traveler should avoid, and so on. This is completely your experience to make with it as you please, you know, literally. I wish I knew that, because I didn't. I started off living in other people's experiences and walking in other people's shoes, in the form of relying too much on guidebooks, relying too much on what I had read about destinations, versus just saying, right, this is me, I've never traveled, but I'm just going to do it how I see fit for myself.
Myself again. So one more question. Someone wants to know the name of the author who wrote that. You mentioned that quote, "Journeys create journeys, internal and external."
It's Adam Levine. The name of the book is The Wanda Safaris.
Muted myself again. I think we have we've more or less run out of time. I need to, yeah, sorry. So I think we've more or less come to the end of this. Someone asked a question about, did I just hear that decolonization is impossible? That's, I think Bao was alluding to a blog post that I wrote on my blog, why I say decolonization is impossible. And the purpose of that blog piece, very briefly, was just to explain, or well, summarize why a lot of what we're doing when we say we're decolonizing is actually not decolonizing, and what decolonization is, if we want to keep the structures that we have without actually rethinking anything, then decolonization will be impossible. So it's not, the title has to go with the blog post. One has to read the blog post to understand what that, what the blog post, what the title means in that context. So thank you for joining us today. If you want to, ask us any questions, apart from the Slido link, you can also email us at foreverafrica@outlook.com. If you haven't registered for tomorrow's webinar, it's a definitely must listen. We are awarding the inaugural Foluke Adebisi Memorial Student Award for Outstanding Pan-Africanism, and we will be joined by Bisi Akekugbe from Canada, Hadiza Kere Abdurrahman from the UK, and the finalists from the student finalists from University of Bristol, Biniam Lombe, Michelle Jideofo, and Chanel Smith. And they have done amazing things, and definitely log in to listen to what they have done, and also a little bit more about the prize and how we're going to be widening it up to students from outside of the University of Bristol, and we hope as wide as possible eventually. So again, thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for logging in and joining us today. Let us appreciate Lerato for everything, for being a fantastic traveler. A round of applause for Lerato for joining us, her time, and for sort of just inspiring us this afternoon. Thank you so much, Lerato, and thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon. Blessings. Thank you.
Thank you.